So I received a request to create a piece of memorabilia that I thought was really cool and would look really great on walnut wood with a gold inlay epoxy. And I found a very nice design with a lot of detail that I really liked. So the project started off as I wanted to do a coaster, slightly larger than an average coaster. And as it turns out, it ended up being a little too much detail for something to go on such a small amount of surface area for a small coaster. I originally tried with the 60-degree routing bit that I have, and that didn't really give me or maintain the detail that I wanted, so I tried using a more precise bit, went down to 30 degrees. Tried that as well, and still found that it was just, for the depth that I need for an epoxy pour, was not the detail that I exactly wanted. So what I decided to do instead was to maintain that detail and get all the details that I want in there, and then just create this really elegant looking design, and have the depth that I need for the epoxy. I decided to glue up two boards together and create a 10-inch placard instead. So after clamping everything down and making it as flat as I thought that I could get it, I started the engraving process. And wood can be difficult in that way, to where it's sometimes difficult to get it as flat as you would like to maintain consistent depth. With this particular machine, it's not always perfect all the way around, just because the z-axis on this particular plasma can machine is not as accurate as the x and y axes. So sometimes it cuts at a slightly different depth, maybe 3/1000s, 5/1000s difference. So I've been also experimenting with ways to fix that problem in the future, but for right now, since I've got a 1/4 inch worth of wood to work with, I just went for it, and whatever depths I ended up with, despite some cupping in the wood, I just went ahead and continued forward. So I went ahead and started the engraving process, and here's a sped up version of that. Took about, I want to say, about an hour and a half for a single cycle. And I think it turned out really well at the end. So since I had so much more surface area to work with now, and make sure after the engraving was finished, I verified all the details were there that I wanted, made sure there was no pieces that chipped off, which was one of the big problems with trying to get so much detail on such a small piece in the previous versions. All the detail came out exactly as I'd hoped. No chips, no breaks, no wood pieces were missing that I'd have to glue back in. So I always start off sanding, starting from 40 grit to 60 grit, 120 grit, 240, all the way up to 330 for the final pass. water popping the grain of the wood between each sanding until the final pass. One thing when working with the thinner woods, like 1/4-inch wood, is water popping can often, and maybe there are better ways to actually account for this that I'm not aware of. But with the thinner woods, water popping always seems to cause cupping, especially if there's not a large amount of epoxy to wood ratio. If there's basically a ton of epoxy, it'll do a good job of holding itself in place and not cup. But on two pieces that thin, glued up, and enough surface area and enough wood to absorb that water, the cupping became a real issue, which I deal with after the 240 pass. You'll see that I spray one side with water and put some weights on it, and I did this process a couple times. The cupping seemed to keep reversing itself in the opposite direction, so I ended up at this last step to put a bunch of weights on it, lightly water pop one side, and just leave it overnight to try and get it as flat as possible, and that seemed to get it as flat as was reasonably expected with this thin of wood. One of my favorite parts is always applying the finish, just because it gives you an amazing preview of what you're expecting after applying a finish coat. In my case, I've been using nothing other than Rubio Monocoat 2C Pure, and I previously have always mixed these together in cups, but I just recently started switching to using syringes to not only avoid spillage over the side and having to waste a lot of the product, and it's not the cheapest finish in the world, so using the syringes not only gave me a better, more accurate mixing ratio for the accelerator and the oil 2C, but it also made a lot less of a mess and made it so that I didn't have to pry the containers open with a screwdriver every time. So for the first time, I am trying in addition to the oil 2C, I am trying the Sheen Plus, because I wanted this piece to have a semi-glossy satin finish. And for that, at this point, after the oil 2C is applied, the recommendation from Rubio Monocoat is to wait 24 hours for that, at least 24 hours I should say, for that first oil coat to completely dry before applying the Sheen Plus. So now we come back tomorrow and apply the Sheen Plus. The Sheen Plus has different recommendations than just applying the 2C, and that is kind of the buffing process, and they recommend polishing in circles with either your hand or any lint-free material, and I decided to use kind of a buffer wheel instead to spread it more evenly, and wasn't totally happy with the effectiveness of that, but it turned out to spread it pretty evenly, and then I came back again with a finer polishing wheel to do the final passes after about 10 minutes of letting this set up. After allowing allowing about another 24 hours for that sheen plus to dry, I was able to take it out into the sun, and I really enjoyed the results. Sometimes the camera doesn't do it justice, or it's hard to see the depth of the epoxy. This was, a metallic gold, so you could really see it kind of shine and shimmer out in the sunlight, which is difficult to see with indoor lighting. But I was really, really pleased with how this came out, and here's the finished product. And I'm really happy with it, and I will catch you guys on the next one.